Welcome to another episode of Broadway Nation, the podcast that tells the extraordinary story of how immigrants, Jews, queers, African Americans, and other outcasts invented the Broadway musical and how they changed America in the process. I'm David Armstrong, and I call this episode Children Will Listen, the Harbach to Miranda Lineage, Part 1. In our very first episode, I described the Broadway musical as being an art and a craft that has been passed down directly from one artist to the next, generation to generation, for more than 125 years. We can literally trace the first-hand connections between composers, lyricists, book writers, directors, producers, and performers from the earliest days of the musical right up to those working on Broadway today. In this episode, we will look at one of the clearest and most significant examples of this kind of legacy chain as we explore the knowledge, understanding, and skills that were handed down directly from Otto Harbach to Oscar Hammerstein to Stephen Sondheim to Lin-Manuel Miranda. At first glance, it may seem that Harbach's loosely constructed musical comedies and operettas would have little relationship to Rodgers and Hammerstein's tightly woven, story-driven musical plays, and that Sondheim's edgy, ironic, sardonic musicals would have nothing to do with the open-hearted Hammerstein shows that came before him, or with Lin-Manuel's hip-hop-influenced work that followed. But a closer look reveals a very direct influence. Together, the combined works of these four musical theater giants encompasses virtually the entire history of the American musical theater. Today, we're going to explore that deep connection between these four masters of the musical. Once again, my friend and esteemed colleague Albert Evans is here with me to help tell this story. So, Albert, who exactly was Otto Harbach?
Well, Otto Harbach wrote the book and or the lyrics for a really incredible 45 Broadway musicals. And you probably don't know his name, but if you have ever heard the song Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, you have experienced his talent for writing lyrics.
They ask me how I knew my true love was true. I, of course, replied, something here inside cannot be denied. They said someday you'll find all who love are blind. When your heart's on fire, you must realize smoke gets in your eyes.
He was born in 1873, the son of Danish immigrants. He grew up in Salt Lake City, where his parents worked on a farm, and joined and then left the Mormon Church. His family was very poor, but somehow Otto worked his way through college. He graduated from Knox College in Illinois and then received a Master's of English at Whitman College in Washington State.
Meanwhile, in 1895, in New York, Oscar Hammerstein II was being born into a theatrical dynasty. His father, Willie, was one of America's most successful theater managers. He ran Hammerstein's Victoria Theater, the most popular vaudeville house in New York at that time. His brother Arthur was a successful producer of musical comedies and operettas. Both were the sons of the German-Jewish immigrant Oscar Hammerstein I, a flamboyant showman whose name and face were continually in the public eye as he made and lost fortunes, built 12 theaters, ran several opera companies, and conducted well-publicized theatrical feuds. He also had a mad passion for litigation and was always involved in some legal action or another, and at one point he had 40 separate lawsuits all going at the same time. Young Oscar knew almost nothing of all this while growing up in a comfortable but sheltered environment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. He was, in fact, purposely kept away from theaters and show people because his father, Willie, though immensely successful, hated the theater. He was only in it because it was the family business. But then in his teens, Oscar discovered what his father and uncle did for a living, and like his grandfather, he fell hopelessly in love.
It was around this time that Otto Harbach came to New York with the intent of getting a PhD from Columbia University. But when failing eyesight made reading painful, he dropped out to take a job in advertising. Then in 1906, he saw George M. Cohan's show, 45 Minutes from Broadway, and instantly became fascinated by the possibilities of musical theater. 2 years later, he wrote the lyrics for a Broadway musical called Three Twins that introduced one of the most popular songs of the era, Cuddle Up a Little Closer.
Cuddle up a little closer, lovey mine. Cuddle up and be my little clinging vine.
Like to feel your cheeks so rosy,
Like to make you comfy, cozy, 'cause I love from head to toesy, lovey mine.
Over the next 12 years, Otto would work on 17 Broadway musicals. Most of them were hits, and many of them were produced by Oscar's uncle, Arthur Hammerstein.
As Oscar's passion for theater deepened, his father grew very concerned, and on his deathbed he made Oscar swear to become a lawyer and never, ever go into the theater. 3 years later, in 1912, Hammerstein made good on this promise and entered the Columbia University School of Law. But ironically, it was at Columbia that he became permanently hooked on the theater, when he joined the Columbia University Players and performed each year in their annual varsity show. In 1917, he was asked to write the varsity show entitled Home James, his first book for a musical, and he also played the comic lead. The next year, when America joined the First World War, Hammerstein was eager to enlist, but was turned down because he was classified as underweight. Despondent, he left Columbia, and after much effort finally convinced Uncle Arthur to take him into the family business. He began first as a gopher, what we would call an intern today. He would later write, "I was an office boy and play reader by day, stage manager by night, and an eager kibitzer at the rehearsals of new shows." He was soon given the chance to try his hand at contributing lyrics to some of the musicals his uncle was producing, and then his uncle decided to team him up with the more experienced Otto Harbach so that he could really learn his craft.
Although he was 22 years older than Oscar, Harbach was more than willing to take him on as a sort of junior partner. As Todd Purdom writes in his recent book, Something Wonderful, it was a fateful collaboration. Harbach was a kind and generous mentor, and he insisted that Oscar, whose instinct was to write very quickly, slow down and think seriously about his goals before putting words to paper. He likened the construction of a musical play to building a fire in which all the elements, the logs, kindling, matches, a good flue, everything had to come together.
Inspired by Harburg, Hammerstein began to envision a kind of show in which the songs would be a more integral part of the story, and in which both the songs and the story would more meaningfully express human life and emotion. This intention was realized only haltingly and infrequently at first, but eventually this idea would change the structure and indeed the very nature of the American musical.
Harbach and Hammerstein would collaborate on the book and lyrics for 10 musicals and operettas, including the smash hits Rosemary, Sunny, and The Desert Song, working with many composers of varying styles such as Rudolf Frimmel, Vincent Youmans, Sigmund Romberg, and Jerome Kern.
Then it was time for Hammerstein to go off on his own. In 1927, he and Jerome Kern decided to adapt Edna Ferber's best-selling novel, Showboat, for the musical stage. Many of his colleagues thought this was a crazy idea. After all, Ferber's plot dealt not just with failed marriage, gambling addiction, and alcoholism, but most significantly, the center of the story revolves around issues of racial prejudice and miscegenation, none of which had ever been dramatized on the musical stage. But Hammerstein and Kern had vision and courage and did not shy away from the novel's dramatic themes and events. The result was one of the most beautiful, entertaining, and tune-filled musicals of all time. It is a show that still delights, moves, and amazes us more than 90 years after it was first performed. Perhaps more importantly, it demonstrated how musicals could embrace important subject matter, especially issues of race and equality, which from that point on would become the principal subject matter of the American musical. This may surprise you, but I can count more than 30 hit musicals that have issues of race at the center of their story. Actually, I suppose it shouldn't surprise us. The struggle for racial and ethnic equality and the battle against bigotry and intolerance have been major issues in this country from colonial times right up to this week. And since the musical is our great original American art form, perhaps it is only natural that it would so often reflect and illuminate this aspect of our culture.
Hi, this is David Armstrong, and if you're enjoying this episode, I strongly suspect that you'll want to read my new book, Broadway Nation: How Immigrant, Jewish, Queer, and Black Artists Invented the Broadway Musical, which is on sale now wherever books are sold. And I'm happy to report that the reviews have been terrific. Noted author and theater historian Peter Felicia of Broadway Radio writes that there's so much information here that Broadway Nation could almost be called a textbook, but it's much too fun to be described as such. So let's just say it's a textbook example of how to write about musicals and how to do it right. And author and Princeton professor Stacy Wolf says that David Armstrong's Broadway Nation is a lively, engaging, and fascinating journey through the vibrant history of the Broadway musical. Whether you're a historian, a theater maker, or a passionate fan, Broadway Nation is an important and impossible to put down tribute to the diverse voices behind the Great White Way. And finally, Tony Award-winning lyricist David Zippel says David Armstrong's insightful history of the evolution of the Broadway musical and its creators is captivating and comprehensive, as well as indispensable. Of course, you can find it on Amazon, or better yet, have it ordered by your local bookshop. But if you go to the publisher's website, bloomsbury.com, you can order it at 10% off the full price of either the hardcover or the paperback. Again, like the podcast that inspired it, the book is titled Broadway Nation: How Immigrant, Jewish, Queer, and Black Artists Invented the Broadway Musical. Now, back to the show.
3 years after the premiere of Showboat, Stephen Sondheim was born on March 22nd, 1930. Strangely enough, he shares the same birth date as Andrew Lloyd Webber, born in 1948. Stephen was the only child of a prosperous German-Jewish garment manufacturer named Herbert and his designer wife, known to all as Foxy. Sondheim's father would frequently entertain out-of-town buyers by taking them to see the latest Broadway musicals. And since he was also an accomplished amateur musician, he was able to return home and play the hit tunes from all of those shows from memory on the family's grand piano, to his son's great delight. Among the first Broadway musicals that young Sondheim remembers being taken to were Rodgers and Hart's The Boys from Syracuse in 1938 and Jerome Kern and Oscar Hammerstein's Very Warm for May, 1939. Though not a success, Very Warm for May introduced a classic ballad, which Sondheim has said was one of the songs that inspired him to want to become a composer. The song was called All the Things You Are.
You are the promised kiss of springtime that makes the lonely winter seem long. You are the breathless hush of evening that trembles on the brink of a lovely song. You are the angel glow that lights a star. The dearest things I know are what you are. Someday my happy arms will hold you, and someday I'll know that moment divine when all the things you are
Just 2 years later, Hammerstein himself would become an integral part of young Sondheim's life. On a summer's day in 1941, a friend of Sondheim's mother, Dorothy Hammerstein, arrived for a visit with her 10-year-old son Jimmy in tow. An instant friendship was established between the two boys, and by the end of that first visit, they informed their mothers that Steve would be coming to spend the weekend at the Hammerstein summer place in Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Sondheim would end up staying the rest of the summer there, and soon became more a part of the Hammerstein family than his own.
Jimmy's father was, of course, Oscar Hammerstein II. He was 46 years old at the time, and he had not had a hit show in almost 10 years. He was, however, just beginning what would become his historic collaboration with Richard Rodgers.
Sondheim says that he osmosed into the Hammerstein household. They were my surrogate family. My mother was a difficult lady, and I had a difficult time with her. This seems to be something of an understatement. Sondheim's mother was, in the words of Jimmy Hammerstein, the worst mother I have ever seen. He goes on to say that Steve adopted us, and if you prized your mental health, it was a sensible emotional position to take. Dad always had time to talk to Steve. As a child, Sondheim was full of rage and pain and anger, but Hammerstein seemed to be able to bypass that and to get to some other place with him. His relationship with Oscar Hammerstein would come to shape and inspire Sondheim's life. He said, "I wrote for the theater in order to be like Oscar. I have no doubt that if Oscar had been an archaeologist, I would have become an archaeologist."
Meanwhile, Hammerstein made a tremendous comeback with the groundbreaking Oklahoma, his first collaboration with Richard Rodgers. What was it about Oklahoma that made it so revolutionary? When Rodgers and Hammerstein decided to adapt a moderately successful little play called Green Grow the Lilacs, they didn't set out to break all the rules or throw out all the conventions of the musical comedy. They just allowed the source material and subject matter to dictate the ways in which they would musicalize the story. If that meant instead of bringing the curtain up on a lively chorus song and dance number, as was typical of the time, but instead have the curtain reveal just one middle-aged farm woman churning butter as a cowhand begins to sing "Oh What a Beautiful Morning" offstage and a cappella, then so be it. If it meant the chorus girls would not even enter until 40 minutes into the play, that was okay too. If it meant including the violent death of one of the major characters, practically unheard of in musicals of the day, then that is what they would do. Because of their uncompromising approach, the show had tremendous trouble raising money for production. Nobody thought it would work. When producer Billy Rose was approached to invest money, he dismissed the show with the now classic line, "No gags, no girls, no chance." Very few people have ever been proven so completely wrong. From the very first performance in New Haven of Away We Go, as it was called at the time, it was clear that the creators were onto something special. At the second pre-Broadway stop in Boston, several changes were made. One song was cut, and the show was given a new title when another song was changed from a duet into a big, rousing chorus number. Oklahoma played 2,243 performances, more than twice as long as any previous Broadway musical, and touring productions would crisscross America for the next 10 years. The Decca original cast recording, the first complete recording of a musical, sold over 1 million copies, and it has never gone out of print. And because of the popularity of the cast album, millions of people who never got to see the show in a theater still were able to experience the story and the characters and to fall in love with the show. Because of this overwhelming success, it was understood that creators of musicals would now need to emulate this new kind of musical. Even musical comedies would from that point on have to integrate all of their elements and use the songs to help tell the story.
Around the same time, during his sophomore year at a prep school called the George School, Sondheim wrote his first musical, and it was entitled By George. Like so many school shows, it was a satire of campus life. Sondheim thought the show was pretty terrific, and with his brain dancing with visions of being the first 15-year-old to have a show on Broadway, he asked Hammerstein to read it as if it were just a musical that crossed your desk as a producer.
As Martin Gottfried related the story in his 1993 book about Stephen Sondheim, the next morning Hammerstein telephoned and suggested that the youngster come over to hear his assessment. Now, you really want me to treat this as if it were by somebody that I don't know?
Yes, please, the boy urged.
Well, in that case, Hammerstein said, it's the worst thing I ever read in my life.
Tears began to form in the adolescent's eyes.
I didn't say it wasn't talented, Hammerstein hastily added. I said it was terrible. And if you want to know why it's terrible, I'll tell you. With that, the famous Broadway lyricist and librettist who had written Showboat and Oklahoma analyzed every aspect of By George, from the first stage direction to the finale. And that afternoon would change Stephen Sondheim's life. But if you want to hear the rest of the story, you'll have to join me for my next podcast, where the legacy chain of the Broadway musical will continue on its direct path from Harbach to Hammerstein to Sondheim to Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Careful the things you say, children will listen. Careful the things you do, children will see and learn. Children may not obey, but children will listen. Children will look to you for which way to turn, to learn what to be.
Broadway Nation is produced and written by me, David Armstrong. This episode was co-hosted and co-written by the indispensable Albert Evans. Thanks to everyone at 101.9, the voice of beautiful Vashon Island, Washington, and especially everyone at the Broadway Podcast Network.
Wishes are children.